as you can see that we've got an eminent speaker today who is an international speaker. So there are many people from across the globe who contribute to Indian Society for Quality. The president of Indian Society for Quality happens to be Mr. Janak Mehta. I'm sure everybody knows about him. He is the first individual Deming Prize winner outside of Japan. And it has got the governing council of the Indian Society for Quality has representatives from the leadership positions of various eminent organizations. And so Indian Society for Quality works in different chapters, and the chapters are divided on the basis of the geographical regions. For example, Bangalore, Pune, National Capital Region, Chennai, Jamshedpur, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. Mumbai chapter is still under discussion. Hyderabad chapter is the most recent one that has been launched. And my colleagues who, I can see that there are some colleagues of mine from pre-sustainability who have joined. So please feel free to, or rather, I would encourage strongly that you become members of the Hyderabad chapter of the Indian Society for Quality and contribute to the cause of quality. And it's a very fulfilling journey. We have different activities that we carry out. Annual conference happens to be the flagship event that happens every year. Along with that, every November is celebrated as the Quality Month across the globe. So we conduct Quality Month lectures. One of those is happening today that we are all a part of. You also see Mr. M. Ramanathan on your screen. He is a very sought after quality guru, and one program that he conducts, and it's one of the best programs that, much better than conducted by any, I have no hesitation in saying that it's much better than the ones conducted by some eminent business schools also. It is called CEO through TQM, which means creating extraordinary organizations through total quality management. And so there is a schedule for this program, which keeps happening in different cities. So if you are part of a senior leadership of any company, you are most welcome to attend this session. Along with that, there are various other forums that keep happening. And so this is about the Indian Society for Quality. Because I'm not able to present the slides right now, I think it will make sense if you go to the website of ISQ individually and learn more about Indian Society for Quality. And we will be more than happy to answer your questions and assist you, further with the knowledge on the subject of quality, or if you want to become a member of ISQ, or if you want to contribute in any other way. So that's all. And I'll now request Mr. N. Ramanathan to take the stage and introduce our speaker for the day. Mr. Ramanathan, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit. It's a great privilege for me to introduce Mr. David Hutchins to you. First of all, thank you, David, for agreeing to speak to us. I also want to remind everybody here who are not aware of the time zones that it must be 6:40 or 6:45 in the morning for you. And so it's very kind of you to accept, this talk at this hour. We had a minor shift in our program. Normally we hold it 11 and 10:30 in the morning, and Prabhakar agreed to shift it to 12 for you, but it's still way too early. Thank you very much. I want to, first of all, say that Mr. Hutchins is one of the very, very few people in England that you will find who actually teaches and practices TQM the way we understand it. It's not such a common thing in England to be teaching or practicing TQM the way we understand it. So he's very much in sync with what the kind of things that we do. He's also very familiar with India. He keeps coming to India many times, and he's, especially in the QC Circle activities. And in fact, next month he's going to be in Lucknow in December, and I should assume it's on the QC Circle Forum again, Quality Circle Forum again, right? So he's very much familiar with India, and that is a bonus. Before I talk about his professional standing, I also want to say that he's a great photographer. He loves to carry his camera around, very advanced camera, and takes masterpieces of pictures. And once in 2014, he left his valuable camera in the bullet train and got off at Nagoya, and was very worried for some time. But Japan being Japan, the Japanese found out that the camera had gone to the lost and found in Osaka. And the next morning at the station, he could get his camera back. So he's an avid photographer. But let me talk about his professional standing. He was the UK representative of the Juran Institute in the 80s and right up to 1992. And that's quite something. Later, also Six Sigma Master Black Belt of Juran Institute itself. Mr. Hutchins has written many books, and some of it I think you should go to Amazon and look up and read. He's best known for his Hoshin Kanri book and it's spreading the practice of policy management in a strategic way. And his last book, Quality Beyond Borders, which I have with me in my bookshelf, is another book that many of you might be interested in. And this book won the Walter Maising Award of the International Academy for Quality. So that tells you that it's the kind of book that you ought to be reading if you're interested in total quality management. So he's of course a very respected figure in the International Academy for Quality, and he's had experience worldwide in many countries, including Egypt and South Africa and so on, where he has won an award. And he's, taking, professionals professionals interested in learning about total quality management in groups to Japan. He took one such group in the month of May this year. We know that. So from his photo, you can see that like me, he's not. He's young at heart, so he has 50 years of experience in this whole field, and very active, very, very active, very busy and very active. Whenever we want him for a meeting, he's got 100 other things clashing with that schedule. So, by the way, his educational background, that is, he's got a master's in quality and reliability statistics, right? And he's a winner of very many awards and the author of many books. We are really privileged to have him as a speaker here today in the Quality Month. Thank you very much, David. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, and can you see PDCA on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, good. We've got off to a good start. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I'll just say a word about the camera that you were talking about just now. The camera, actually, when I got back that evening, the camera was in a box on my pillow in my bedroom. They'd gone to that trouble. That was amazing. But anyway, I'll not talk anymore now other than to get on to the subject that we're here to talk about today. I'm calling it dynamic PDCA. Many people are aware of the PDCA cycle, but they see it just as a simple little diagram, and they don't realize, many people don't realize just how much depth you can take it. And what I'm hoping to do in this presentation this morning is to give you an insight into that depth. So I'll move on. So it's been in use since 1926. Its history is controversial. There are many people who think that Dr. Deming originated it, and then some others say Professor Ishikawa, Dr. Feigenbaum. There are some who think Dr. Juran invented it, but in actual fact, it was Dr. Walter Schuhart who, in 1926, when he first wrote a description of control charts in the Hawthorne plant of Western Electric, which is part of Bell Labs. And it was from that source. But if you then research that further back, what you actually discover was that prior to that, there was a term called the closed feedback loop of management control, and you can trace that pretty well. The concept behind it, anyway, you could trace that right back to Socrates and Plato. So the idea has been there, but it's only in the 20th century when it became crystallized as PDCA. But that's by the by. What I want to do this morning is to
On slideshow.
Can
you
see?
Put it on slideshow?
What are you seeing?
To put it on slideshow, so there is an icon in the bottom row, which looks like a cup.
I've only got a camera.
Yeah, you click on that, you will get the slideshow. The one that looks like a cup. You know, in the bottom row, you find notes.
On the very bottom. Oh, wait a minute. I'll stop sharing.
Yes, I think, yeah, Mr. Hutchins, you have to share your entire screen, then it would work. Just click on the share button.
I put stop share. What can you see?
Yes, I can. We can see your camera. We can see you.
You can see me.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Please click on the share button. I think you've stopped sharing now. So please click on the share button again. I'll help you with the steps.
Hang on a second. So now I can see that thing. So I click on the share button again.
Yes.
Which I just have. I don't know. I have problems with this. I don't know why. I've clicked on the share button and it says recording has started, but I've clicked on the share screen window or tab.
Yeah. So click on entire screen. Yeah. After that.
Yep, done that.
And then just tap on the image. Just do a click on the image of your screen that would be visible to you.
Which I've done.
And click the share button down below.
What is it? What can you see now?
Yeah, now we can see your screen. Now we can bring your slides up. You can just go to your slides and we'll be able to see.
What can you see now?
We see PDCA history. What is PDCA?
Ah, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start from there, if that's okay. And I leave it like that, or do you want me to put it on the full screen?
Whichever way is comfortable for you.
How's that?
Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, this is fine. Great. Yeah.
Good. Right. Okay. So I hope you caught what I was saying before. But I said that a number of people, it's attributed to a number of different people, which is not terribly relevant, really. What is more important is what it is and how it works. And it has got a history that just goes back beyond our time. And in terms conceptually, anyway, not necessarily the acronym. And the origins of Schuhart's work was when he was on a team at Bell Labs, and it was set up by a Dr. Jones, and he set up this team of people who you can see on the screen the names of them. There's Schuhart, you will know. Duran, you will know. If you've read American mathematical tables, you'll know Dodge and Romick, those two characters. But all of those people, in their way, in the USA at least, were famous in the field of quality. So PDCA, as I said earlier on, it can actually, conceptually, it can be traced all the way back to Socrates and Plato. But that's not what we're here to look at today. If you go back to those earlier days, it was originally likened to a servo mechanism. And in a servo mechanism, if you take, say, for example, a central heating system, a central heating system has PDCA, but it's actually an open loop system. I'll tell you why in a second. You have a stat or a thermostat, and that, if you like, is the plan. So you set the thermostat to 22 degrees. You think that's what you want the temperature to be. And so the stat then says what is the actual temperature. So it's actually checking the actual temperature. But the plan is 22, and it turns on the pump and the boiler. And so the pump and the boiler together heat the water up, and it's registering this as it heats up, and the radiators then are putting the heat into the room. Now, this is an open loop system because when the temperature reaches 22 degrees, if it goes beyond it to 23 or 24, it happens to be a warmer day than you thought it was going to be, it's got no means to cool it down again. So it can heat it up to that, but it can't take it back down. So that's an open loop system. Later on, I'll show you that you can have open loop systems in management control as well. If you wanted that to be a closed loop system, what you'd have to do would be to put aircon in so that if it goes above the 22 degrees, it has the means of cooling it back down again. So it needs to be able to take it in both directions. And it was really this idea originally that led to the development of management control and the closed loop management system. And then Schuhart labeled it PDCA, or Deming did, or somebody else did. But as I say, that's not terribly relevant. Now, we're using PDCA. Tell me if I'm talking too quickly, by the way. It's different being in a room with people than it is when you're on a computer. I'm talking to my computer. PDCA is something that we use without realizing it, even when we make a cup of tea. And in its simplest form, let me just show you. We make a cup of tea. If we're making the cup of tea, we've made tea lots of times before. So the plan is actually in our head. We probably don't write it down or write a recipe for making a cup of tea. It's not a written plan. It's one that's in our head from our previous experience. And we just make sure that everything we want is there. There's a kettle and a socket to plug it into. Do we have any tea, milk, sugar, clean cups, and so on? And so this is our plan, if you like, and just making sure that everything's there. So with the plan in place, we go into the do part of the operation. We begin to make the tea. We put the kettle on. Now, in this version of it, I'm standing there waiting for my kettle to boil. When the kettle's boiled, I get the cups. I put the tea bags in. If I'm making it with tea bags, I might make it in a teapot. Pouring it on the boiling water, get the milk from the fridge, pour it onto the water, put sugar in, and stir the tea. So that's the doing part of the plan do. And now we come to the check. So I might check it myself before I give it to anyone else to drink, or I give them to drink, and then I ask them whether it's okay or not. And let's suppose one of the guests, probably your own wife, says that the process took too long to do it. And you think, well, I ought to improve on that. I wonder what I can do to improve on it. And so we take action. And so to take action, the first thing we want to do is to remove non-added value time. If I want to make it happen more quickly, I've got to take some time out of the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is to actually map the process. And to map the process, I can use a flow diagram if I want to do it this way. And the flow diagram, an operation is this little circle at the top. That means that I'm physically changing something from one state to another. If I'm changing something one state to another, that's an operation because you're moving the product closer to the final state that you want it to be. But then there was a delay. I stood around waiting for the kettle to boil. Well, that's wasted time. It's non-added value time. Then I get the cups and the saucers, the milk from the fridge, the sugar, the tea bags, and so on. And all of those are transport. I'm carrying them from one place to another. Now that delay and these are all opportunities for improvement because the delay, obviously, I want to see if I can do something about that. But the cups and saucers, maybe I don't even keep them in the same room as I'm making the tea. I get the milk from the fridge. The fridge might be out in the garage and so on. And so there are opportunities for improvement there by shortening the transport time, because that's also non-added value. So the delay and the transports are non-added value. So I then move the cups so they're in a cupboard right by the kettle, and I move the fridge if I really want to go that far, and so on. I move all these things so that they're very close to where I'm going to make the tea. So I might not be able to eliminate the transport, but I might be able to shorten it considerably. I then pour the hot water onto the cups. That's an operation. And I pour in the milk and stir it. And I'm doing the two at the same time. So that's a combined operation, which I show like that. Now, maybe that suits me. I've taken those things out of the process, and that was the action. Next time I make the tea, I remember all of that. And so I make it that much more quickly. So that's a quick run round the PDCA cycle. Now, all of that activity that I just described was carried out by me. So if all of the operations, plan, do, check, act, are carried out by the same person, you could say that I was a craftsman because I was responsible for the whole of that cycle. It was my plan. I took the action. I did it rather. I checked it myself while I was doing it. And I took action if I didn't like the result. So that's an example of craftsmanship, as you can see from this young lady in the picture. So I can draw it like that. Now, in an industrial environment, you can see if you've got craftspeople, if you're employing craftspeople, you've got the PDCA over here, but then you usually have a foreman or a supervisor. And generally speaking, in a craft environment, the foreman or supervisor is probably the most skilled craftsman. And that was probably why they were made foreman in the first place. So the foreman in that environment is a very highly regarded person and very much respected by the workforce, because they hope one day maybe I could aspire to that. So they're trying to keep on building and developing their skills in the hopes that one day they might be a foreman. Now, on the other side of that line, there's management. Management, generally speaking, doesn't have the skills in that job. They may have, but more often than not, the managers are there to, and the owners of the company provide the money, the resources, the tools and everything like that. Generally under the guidance of the foreman will say, well, we need some of this, we need some of that. So the foreman is also regarded as being very important by management too. So you've got, and for somebody over on the craftsman side, probably just to live in the same street as the foreman or supervisor and be able to walk to work with him, they probably think they were born lucky, and obviously get some tips from them and so forth. And so that's the model, if you like, in a craft environment. Now, unfortunately, in my country, in World War I, we took a very high proportion of those craftsmen out of our towns and cities, and we sadly buried them in the killing fields of France in World War I. Millions of people killed, and So that more or less destroyed our craft-based labor force. And because we needed high quantities of munitions and so forth, the wives of those people had to come into the factories to produce the product. But they hadn't done apprenticeships. They weren't craftspeople. They hadn't got the 5, 6, 7 years of training to develop those skills. And so it was necessary to take the skill out of the work. So jobs were broken down into their smallest elements. The smaller, the better, because it required less and less skill to do it. But if you take the skill out of the work, you've got to make sure that the work is still of the right quality. So you introduce a new class of person called an inspector. And an inspector doesn't make anything. All an inspector does is to check what somebody's done and separate good from bad. But that system started in the UK anyway, in World War I. It started more or less the same time in the USA, but for a different reason. I'm sure all of you, or some of you anyway, are aware of an American management scientist, Frederick W. Taylor. And Taylor studied work. In fact, it became known as work study, and studied work. And he said that a better system would be to elevate problem solving to managers and break jobs down to their smallest elements, so that you can make use of untalented people, just do their job according to instructions. And that system is very powerful from a productivity point of view. You can produce very large quantities of products at low cost, but it probably has a detrimental effect on quality, but we'll come to that later. If you wanted to look into that more deeply, if you get hold of one of Adam Smith's books, Adam Smith, long before Taylor, commented on it, because even this division of labor goes all the way back to Plato and Socrates as well. None of this is new, but he commented on a pin factory, and in the pin factory they could make something like 10 people could make 34,000 pins a day apparently, and they were using division of labor. So one of them cut the length of material from a reel of steel, another one put a point on it, another one put a hole through the end, and so on. There were about 10 operations apparently in making a pin, and they made 34,000 a day. He said that if an individual made the whole pin on their own, they'd probably be lucky to make about 10 or 15 pins in a day. And so there was this tremendous value in that system, which spread through the United States up to and including World War II. And although we started it in the UK for a different reason, we were very impressed, as was the whole of the rest of the world, with this very, very powerful system that had developed in the USA. And so after World War II, the whole world copied it, including Japan. So straight after the war, the Americans, in order to help rebuild Japan after the devastation of World War II, General MacArthur, who was the supreme commander of the forces in Japan, set up what was called this CCS committee, which was Homer Saracen, Charles Protzman, and Frank Polkinghorne were put together to create a training program for Japanese that was largely based on the Hawthorne plant of Western Electric, because that's where a lot of their skill came from. And that included the so-called Taylor system of management. And that was when Dr. Deming was invited out there to help them introduce statistical process control. It already existed in Japan. It existed in Japan before World War II, but it wasn't popular. And Fortunately, Deming had such a style and method that he impressed the Japanese with statistical process control. And in 1950, he ran a number of lectures that resulted in, you mentioned Mr. Metters was the first person to win the Deming Prize in India. And the Deming Prize was created in 1951. And it was the basis of it was that they were very impressed with Deming's lectures, and they asked if they could use his teaching notes and run courses on basis of his teaching notes, and they wanted to buy them from him. He said that he didn't want to sell them to them, he would give them to them. I think he was paid by the American government anyway, and I don't think it was socially a good idea. I don't think he felt he could sell them. But the Japanese don't like getting something for nothing, and they wanted to reward him, and so they named their National Quality Award in his name. So that was the origin of the Deming Prize. But anyway, I mentioned the closed loop system. Let's just take a little look at the way this works in any environment. Now, I said in the cup of tea that we made the whole tea. Typically in our factories, the plan if we're running on a Taylor style factory, management managers and people do. Generally, the plan is created by managers, and then they throw the plan over the wall into the factory, and the people in the factory have to figure out a way of making it. It's quite often not communicated effectively. So on this line here between plan and do, there's a possibility of flaws in the process. So if the plan is not clear to the workforce, maybe they can't, they think they're doing the right job, but it's because they misunderstood the instructions perhaps, or maybe they're not given the right tools to do the job. They're not properly trained and so forth. So you've got where I've put that little red arrow, there's a possibility of things not working as well as you'd like. Unfortunately, typically what happens is that management sees that this hasn't happened properly and then starts accusing the workforce. The workforce were doing the best they could from what they knew, and so they end up getting angry. And so you've got the possibility now of industrial relations problems just across that boundary. Sorry, I'll come back to that. So that boundary there is something to look at in an organization. So using PDCA can be very helpful in trying to improve the processes that you're operating. And is it communicated properly to the workforce? Then from the doing to the checking, who does the checking? Well, I mentioned earlier on that you've got a class of person called an inspector. The inspector generally is independent from the doing. I know while you're doing a job, you're probably inspecting it while you're doing it. If you're painting a door, you can't paint a door with blindfold. You have to be able to see what you're doing. So some inspection or some of the checking happens in the doing process, even in the simplest of tasks. But formally in a factory, in a big organization, there's usually a group of people called inspectors who are separate from production. And then the question is, they find deficiencies. The question then is, who do they feed that information to? So we've got this another boundary here, and we say, who do they feed the information to? Well, they might feed it back to the workforce. In some cases, possibly they do. But generally speaking, they're more likely to feed that information through a management process to the managers. So the managers now see a difference between what they hoped for in their plan and what they're actually getting as a consequence. but they don't know why. They know it's not working properly, but they don't know why it's not working properly. One inclination is to go and punish the workforce, or be angry with the workforce or something like that, criticize them. But that's not very helpful, because it's not telling them what to do different from what they were doing before. But this happens a lot. The next step on that then, so we've got two possibilities now with the checking. One, not feeding the information back to the workforce. Maybe the inspectors, we look at that interface there, but we also look at the interface between management and the inspection. And then we come finally, let me jump to it. Oh no, staying with inspection. I'll go back one. With inspection, we have an idea that if we inspect something 100%, we get 100% separation of good from bad. But the inspector's not perfect either. In fact, quite often very far from perfect. Not for anything you can blame him for, but it can be that they've got their, have we tested their eyesight? How about time on task? People get bored if they're doing the same thing all day long. They get easily distracted. Forklift truck might go behind somebody while they're inspecting something. The tannoy goes and there's announcements coming through on a loudspeaker. And human beings, actually, you might not realize this, but actually human beings are only capable of doing one thing at a time. You know, if you're at home sitting there with a channel changer with a TV, and maybe you don't have a program, you don't know what all the programs are, you're watching something and you think, I'm not sure I like this too much, there might be something better on, so you change channels and you flick around the channels till you find one you like. The human brain works a bit like that, but it does it so quickly you don't notice it. And so if you're listening to me, you're probably not thinking about something else that's going on in your surroundings. Or if something in your surroundings catches your attention, you miss what I said. You don't notice it because that little gap, probably you joined the last bit you heard of me to the next bit you heard of me, and it sounds like it's continuous, but it's not. One example of this that I give people, when you drive to work in the morning, have you ever thought when you've got to work, if someone asked me how I got here from my home to here, could you actually remember the color of all the whether you stopped at all the traffic lights, whether there were traffic lights, if you got more than one route, which route did you actually take? And sometimes you actually can't remember that, but you obviously were paying attention enough to get from A to B. But the detail of it, you lose a lot of it because you're only paying enough attention to keep out of trouble. And it's the same with an inspector. An inspector could be inspecting bottles going along a track and think that he's watching everyone diligently. He probably is for about the first 20 minutes. But then his performance drops off can drop off quite significantly. It depends how boring the task is in itself. In situations where it's really, really important that people don't make mistakes, they'll quite often rotate people every 20 minutes. You'll find if you go and look at air traffic control, for example, in your airports, you probably find that the air traffic controllers are probably switched around every 20 minutes or so, because that's as long as you can rely on people being attentive. If you have those repetitive tasks in your factories and you find that an inspector's on it all day, probably his performance has dropped off alarmingly through the day, and that's why some of your defective work reaches the customer. So if you look at that slide there that I've just put, and the content of that slide, if you go on the internet and put some of those things on there. If you put reliability of the human inspector, there are not many books on this subject, at least not books that are written in everyday language. They are usually very scientific papers on, you know, human performance and psychology and ergonomics and so forth. But there's usually enough in these papers that makes sense for you to actually understand the subject. And if inspection performance is a problem in your organization, it's worth going online, Googling any of these terms, some others as well. If you want, I can tell you them. You can look up Mackworth clock test, or you can look up, can't think of them for the moment, but if you're interested, come back to me and I'll give you some more detail on that. So even within the checking, don't think that 100% checking gives 100% sorting of good from bad, because it doesn't. So then we got the action. What do we do about this information? Well, you can see that from planning to doing, from doing to checking, and now up to here, there's an awful lot that we might have missed. So if it's management that's taking the action, they might, if they're lucky and they have got good information, they might come up with some good improvements. But it can also be quite flawed as well. And so what can we do about that? Well, let's see what we might be able to do about it. Why don't we do something where we have the a management plan, which is a macro plan, an overall plan, if you like. And then with the workforce, maybe we give the workforce some idea of what the plan and discuss it with them, and so that they get a much more clear idea of what's expected of them. And then you go to, so you've now replicated the craftsmanship. But as I said earlier on, craftsmanship is grossly uneconomic compared with the so-called tailor system. And that's what Ishikawa confronted back in 1959. He'd taken the improvement process all the way down from top management, right the way down to frontline supervision. He wanted to take it down to include the workforce. But unfortunately, with the so-called tailor system, if you hire people just to put an exhaust pipe on over and over and over again all day long, and you don't ask them anything, don't involve them in anything, you can't suddenly tell them that they're responsible for the quality of their work and to get into project by project improvement. And Ishikawa contemplated that maybe he couldn't do it on an individual basis, but maybe he could do it with groups. And that's when he postulated the idea of the QC circle. He thought, well, maybe if we get the workers together in little groups, you've got the group dynamics of it, and also collectively they've got more knowledge than just individuals. If they can find some way of putting that knowledge together, and so he came out with the so-called basic tools. They call it the 7 basic tools. If you count them, there's not exactly 7. There's more than that. I don't know if you are familiar with the reason why the number 7 is used a lot by the Japanese. But the reason I'm told is that way back they had a mythical samurai warrior named Benki, and Benki had 7 weapons, and apparently with these 7 weapons he was invincible. And the Japanese, generally speaking, know that story. And so if they use the number 7, people are impressed that this is powerful and important. So you've got the 7 management tools, you've got the 7 basic tools, but there's more than 7 in both of them. But 7's that nice number. It's got a powerful ring to it in Japan. But they're the basic problem-solving tools. And so he postulated doing that. So you had the management macro plan. From that, the workers with the supervisor then worked out a sub plan of their own. The work group checked their own work, compared it with what they planned. They knew what they'd done. Excuse me. So they were able to take action on it within that. Then that information is then fed back to management. Management then can compare its macro plan with what's being achieved down here, and then it can take action on the difference. And the action might be to give the workers more support or something of that kind. And so this is the sort of way, and you can use the PDCA cycle to describe the power behind concepts such as quality circles. So we're coming away from the using the PDCA, we're coming away from management, managers and people do. And if we now look at that model I put up originally, it's now changed it, sorry, staying with the model, I'm forgetting myself. In the so-called Taylor system, you had management planning and people doing. Now, the role of the foreman in this system is grossly diminished from what it was that I described earlier on, because I explained how powerful and important the foreman was. In the system where management is relying on specialists to help them sort of plan the work and so on, and the work is broken down to small elements, all the foreman's job now in this environment where people are just doing is job sorting and giving out job tickets and a bit of discipline. So his status in terms of the workforce, they're probably suspicious of him. They don't see him as somebody that's helping them. So you've got a division now between the workforce and management. And so you've now created with that a communications problem, because the foreman's role is now diminished significantly from how it was. He's just a job ticket sorter. The management are relying on the specialists. The specialists have got company-wide responsibilities. They're not responsible directly to any specific group of people. They probably don't care very much about the specific groups of people either. And it creates a kind of a hostile environment. But if we jump forward, if we go back, if we now have this idea that I mentioned just now, where the management creates a macro plan, which is a larger scale plan, shares that with the foreman and possibly the workforce, who then from that create a plan for themselves. Then you with the QC circle, and you don't have to call them QC circles, call them what you like. Even in Japan, they've got multiple names for them. Different companies give them different names because they like to personalize it. And but everyone in Japan knows that they can call them discover lost groups. They can call them all sorts of things, zero defect teams and so forth. They know very well that they are actually intrinsically quality circles, and the basic structure of quality circles, you'll find it in all of them. So don't get fooled by the different names people use. Kaizen teams, whatever, they're still pretty well all the same or very similar to each other. So if we create that as a model, then that in the yellow diagram on the right is the QC circle, if you like, the workforce in QC circles working that way. When you start this from scratch, if you don't have this at all in a company and you then start to implement it, you can run into difficulties there, because you're making a big change to the work environment. People are used to one system, and then suddenly you're trying to change it to another. One of the groups of that sometimes the managers get nervous about this because they think that the workers will now start throwing back deficiencies in the way they're being managed, and managers are nervous about that. So you can get management resistance to QC circles, which is largely, the managers feel exposed. The specialists think that you're taking their job away and diminishing their job, so the specialists can be hostile to it as well. What you find is that if you get over those difficulties in the early days and you introduce it properly, what you find once it starts to run is that the people here are so appreciative of the fact that work is now being made more interesting, more rewarding, more enjoyable, that they're being treated in this way. They actually thank their managers for creating that. And so instead of having that accusing managers of this, that, and the other, or flagging up management deficiencies, they're actually help their manager to do a job because they like being managed like that. And so they're actually, you've created a harmony between the management and the worker. The specialist discovers that when the quality circles are working on a project, they quite often find they need some technical knowledge or expertise that they don't have. I remember a few years ago, there was a company in the UK I was working with. I don't know if you may have come across a company called Kenwood. Kenwood make food blenders, and they introduced quality circles. I'm going back a long time now. Back in the 80s, quite a few companies did experiment with it, but that's history. I know why, but it's not happening. But at that time, they'd introduced quality circles in Kenwood, and there was a quality circle in the department that made the little gear wheels that you have in a food blender. And they were the reason why they working this project was that there was a Japanese competitor, I've forgotten its name, but their machines were far quieter than the Kenwood was at that time. And they investigated why their machine was making more noise, and they found that it was because of the way they were stamping out the little gear teeth from sheet metal. And if you shear something, about a third of it, if you look at the edge, you'll find about 2/3 of it, the metal's actually ripped rather than actually cut. And they weren't metallurgists. They didn't know how to do that. And they didn't have a metallurgist on the payroll. But not very far from there was a university, Southampton University. And so the facilitator of the quality circles went along, found somebody in the metallurgy department who was quite happy to come along to the factory. And he sat in with the team, and he actually became part of the quality circle while they worked on that project. And he helped them with the metallurgical aspects of it. And what you find in companies is that the circles discover that the specialists are very useful people to have around. And so instead of the specialist being pushed out, the specialist actually finds a much better relationship with the workforce than they previously did. Workforces were generally very suspicious of specialists. They think they're trying to get rid of their jobs and things like that. So this is the, if you like, if you've got QC circles in an organization, you could probably make a model of it looking like I've shown you here. I hope, I'm talking at you a lot here, not being very interactive, but I'll give you the opportunity for questions in a second. I just quickly want to go through. Now, I've put this slide in for a British audience because over here, people have no idea in my country the extent of quality circles in the Far East. I'm trying to tell people all the time what you guys in India are doing, and sometimes it just bounces off. They don't believe it. And so somebody mentioned at the beginning about me taking photos. I'm always keen to take photographs. This was at the ICQCC 2019. And if any of you went to that conference, there were 1,950 people there and 35 countries represented. I was the only person there from the whole of Europe. There was no one there from the US except one guy, but he actually worked in Japan, worked for Toyota. So that doesn't really count. Nobody from Russia, nobody from Scandinavia, nobody from Canada. And they absolutely do not understand what is going on in Japan. It's happening in China, it's happening all around the Far East. And you obviously know what's happening in India. And it seems to me that you're really moving fast in India. And I very much admire the way that you're developing. And just listening to the introduction this morning, the organizations that you've got, and what, the International Society for Quality, the Indian Society for Quality, and so on. Why we're not doing it over here is just so frustrating to me. But I'll move on from there quickly. In order for a worker to do good work, he needs to know what is expected of him. So he needs to know the plan. The plan needs to be properly understood, to do it, to check, and to take action. And I've got an example here, which I actually have modified from one that Dr. Duran uses in his 16-tape series, and to indicate whether a problem is actually management solvable or management controllable. So we've got, let's suppose we've got policy writers or something like that. So these people here, A, B, C, D, E, their job is to write policies, and they can make a number of different sorts of mistakes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now let's have a look at the work of those 6 workers. Now let's take this particular error type 3, and we find that operator B is making 16 of the 19 errors of error type B, and that's a lot. And look at the work of the others, nobody else is making anything like that. But it's only that particular error. You find that the rest of the work of operator B is very good, not making hardly any errors at all. So clearly the operator is misunderstanding that particular instruction. We can modify that easily and find out why that operator is missing that, and we can bring them up to the level of the best. So that operator clearly didn't understand something, so there was something wrong in the way the plan was communicated to them. Now let's look at this one, error type 5. It seems like all of the operators make that error rather uniformly, and experience indicates that when all operators make the same type of error, generally speaking, it's not an operator solvable error. There's a difference between the operator's perception generally of what's required and what management has told them. So this is not an operator controllable error, it's a management controllable error. So there are problems with the plan. In this case, we've got operator E, and operator E makes 36 errors, which is way more than anybody else's. Now, in a situation like that, it's obvious that operator E probably lacks the dexterity or hasn't got the mentality or something for doing that kind of work. And as Duran said in his version of this, that maybe the solution to that is to find a less exacting job for operator E. So you can see that just in this simple little matrix, there are multiple types of operator error. It's not so simple as just simply tell the workers to do a better job. We need to go into that sort of detail. And quality circles can do that. So that concludes pretty well what I wanted to tell you. I just, something else, yes. We've been coming around the loop this way. The loop actually goes back the other way as well. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're a manufacturing company and you're manufacturing, it doesn't matter what you're making, gear, wheels, anything. And an operator makes something and it's out of specification. And the inspector checks it, finds it's out of specification, and you've got a system of isolation of bad from good. So you quarantine these ones that are outside spec for some dimension or other, or some characteristic. Maybe it's not bright and shiny enough or whatever. And so they're separated out. So the inspector sees they're separated out. The operator sees they're separated out. But management is really under pressure from the customer to get some product to them. The customer's desperate to get some product. Management says, well, we unfortunately, we had a bit of a problem with these, and so we can't deliver. And the guy says, well, what's actually the problem? Well, the problem is they're not bright and shiny, or they've got this particular defect. Oh, well, okay, fine. Well, can you ship them anyway? Because we desperately need them, and we can make allowance for that. So the product gets shipped. So management up here has shipped it, but forgot to tell the inspector why they shipped it, and didn't tell the worker either. So the inspector and the worker both see this product get shipped, but no one told them why. Next time they make the product, they recall what happened previously, that, okay, it was out on that dimension or on that feature, but management's going to ship them anyway, so why should we make trouble? So the inspector, although he sees the defect, doesn't report it. It's only going to make trouble. So he doesn't report it. The product gets shipped to the customer. No one told the customer. The customer finds the defect, gets mad with the company. Management then get mad with the workers and get mad with the inspectors. And these people really resent that, because they think, well, you shipped it last time, so why does it matter this time? And it's just that management didn't feed back the information. So you've got a control loop that goes this way round, but in actual fact, there's a feedback loop that goes the other way. So that was actually an open loop system. That was why I put that servo mechanism in up earlier on. You've got to look at the feedback as well as the feed forward. And you've also got a reinforcing loop here, because management doesn't seem to be doing what it said up here, and it finds ways around it, like shipping something that's defective but forgot to tell them. This has reinforced their belief that management is just being difficult with them, and so you build up this resentment loop out here. So I hope that what I've talked you through this morning gives you food for thought, because PDCA is far more important, or there's more to it rather, than is obvious just from that simple little diagram. And another way you can look at it is that if you do an organogram of your company, I haven't got a slide on this, but if you do an organogram of your company from the CEO all the way down the layers to the bottom, and then between each layer, the next one down, the next one down, put the PDCA cycle in there between this layer and that one. So the layer above does the plan, the layer below does what the plan says, and then some means of checking or action, and see if those loops are actually in the whole loop is there. Because you will often find that at different levels down through that management structure, you'll quite often find that there are breakages in that loop and it doesn't feed back. And so you've got communication problems in an organization, which if you use the PDCA cycle through it, you can actually find out where your communication problems are. And I've done that a few times, and it really works. It doesn't take that long to do it, and it's definitely worth it. So I think that is, yeah, that's only just saying the same thing. I'm just putting a few more pictures on it. And oh, finally, we talked about Hoshin Kanri was mentioned earlier on. I created this model based on the way Hoshin Kanri works at Komatsu. And I learned that in 1982 on a study mission I took to Japan. And I couldn't figure out why it was that we had quality circles in the UK and they had them in Japan. And I couldn't understand why our circles were all taught the same tools that the Japanese ones were, but our circles were picking up social issues in the work, which is fine. They need to be dealt with. But the Japanese ones, they were picking things that were obviously very, very important to the quality of the product. And there was that difference. And then I took this study mission to Komatsu, and I had not heard of Hoshin Kanri before that. And they used a diagram very similar to this one in showing how Hoshin Kanri worked. And I could see that because of the vision of the company at the top, the mission and so on, the key performance indicators or critical success factors and so on, and then taking that down layer by layer by layer through to the workforce, each layer virtually doing this at its own level until you come to the bottom, that the people at the bottom knew I mean, if you've got forklift truck drivers in the warehouse, the plan up here might be things like return on investment and et cetera, et cetera. By the time it's come down here, the forklift truck drivers, it might be oil stains on the floor, picking errors, flat battery and things like that. But they know what their part of this is at their level. And then if you've got quality circles, they can then put projects on that. So that's where the plan is up here, action here, doing, and then the checking process on a company-wide basis. So that's PDCA, if you like, for a whole company. And we are. Hello?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
You're still with me. I heard a sound on my computer. So I want to come out of sharing now.
Yeah, you're out of sharing, sir, and we can see you.
Oh, can you? Oh.
Yes, yes. Yes, so thank you so much, Mr. Hutchins. It was, you brought in a completely different perspective on the PDCA. And I'll now request all the participants to please give their questions on the chat box, and I'll go through those questions. I already have one question, sir, from Arunabha Day. And the question is, in PDCA cycle, which factor is most important and why?
Out of the four?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's the interface. I think the interface between the plan and the do is probably the most important, because that's probably going to be the main source of things not working out. The workers
Sure.
think they're doing a good job, but they've misinterpreted management's needs or requirements. And so that interface is really the most important. But then, I think they're all important, because any one of them, if it's deficient, is going to result in things not being as good as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, makes sense. And I personally have one more question for you, sir, and that is related to the previous question. That in the 4 phases of P, D, C, and A, which phase is where we spend most time, or what is the percentage of time that we spend in all of these different phases?
Well, it depends on the way you're organized in the company. If you've got QC circles, I give you one answer. If you don't have QC circles, I'll give you a different answer. If you don't have QC circles, then you've just got the doing down in that bottom right-hand corner, and they just do their job according to instructions. Nobody asks them anything, nobody involves them anything, and they just do what they do day in, day out. No particular interest in their work or anything like that. If you have QC circles, then they're totally involved in what they're doing. They can take an interest in it. I just give you a quick example. When I was helping a big computer company, which is now Fujitsu Computers in the UK, but it was ICL at the time, back in the 1980s. It was a multi-location company all over the UK, and I was putting QC circles into their finance section, which was actually a skyscraper block finance for the company. And the union representative, I was just going to run a quality circle training course, and the union representative asked me if he could come on the course. And I assumed that he wanted to come on it for his to tell his union what was going on. And that happened from time to time, and I don't have a problem with it. I said, yes, you can come and join the course by all means, no problem. But I don't want you to sit at the back just taking notes, because you'll spoil the group dynamics. So I said, if you're prepared to participate in it, then fine, which he did, and he was very good. But at the end of the course, I wanted to know what sort of messages he was going to take back to the union. And I didn't want to make a point of asking him. So I asked everyone in the room, how was the course? How was the course? How was the course? When I got to him, I had a bit of a surprise. He said, the reason I wanted to come on the course, he said, is because a month ago, or a few months ago, you trained my father in another factory. And he said, before he came on this, he said he used to come home from work at night. He'd throw his coat on the hook. He didn't say anything to anybody. He'd go and switch the TV on, sit there and watch TV, eat his meal, go down to the pub for a drink or something, or go to bed, whatever. And he said, after he got involved in this, he was coming home, he was talking about what we're doing, and he was, a complete change. He said, I wanted to come on it to find out what you did to my dad. So
yeah, that's a very, very interesting feedback that I think you must have received, and a great testimony of what doing the PDC in the right way does to you. So that's nice one, sir. Thank you for sharing this example. And so another question and an idea rather that comes from Mr. Ankur Tyagi, and that is, while we make PDCA as a continuous cycle, would it be good to use an overlapping cycle to ensure proper handover at each step, which means do overlaps plan, check overlaps do, act overlaps check, and so on?
I'm not quite sure I completely understood that. Sorry, could you explain it again?
Yeah, so I think what he means to say is that between plan, do, check, and act, does it make
Yeah.
sense to add additional phases that ensure proper handover from plan to do and do to check and check to act, so that there are no pitfalls or those the gaps that you had indicated
Yeah,
could be addressed. Yeah.
I haven't got the slide here. Let me just see if I'll very quickly scribble on a piece of paper. I won't be 2 seconds. Is it possible to read that?
Yes, it's pretty much readable.
Okay, so if you look at over on the right-hand side, you've got top management. Top management, like as in that Hoshin Kanri slide I put up, they planned the whole organization, the structure for the organization, and the way everything is. But that is then taken by the next level down, and they then take this and create a plan at their own level that will help achieve that. So you've got a lot of managers here who will now do their own sort of macro plan, if you like, so that collectively all of these will sum up to that. They then share that down to the lower level and the quality circles, if you like. There might be more than 3 in this run, but down to the workforce. And so each individual group of workers who are under their own particular manager will take what he's got and then break it down and work out how much of it's relevant to them. And if you take a look at an organization, you can see where that structure already exists or where it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then you build it in.
Right, sir. Yeah, so I think that explained it very well, and I'm sure that Mr. Ankur Tyagi, your question got answered here, and Mr. Atul Srivastav also has a similar question, and I guess that the question already got answered in the process of you explaining it through the diagram, and yeah, so I think that is exactly what his question is, and you've already answered it, so I'll not repeat that question here.
Thank you.
Uh, that's all as far as question and answers are concerned for today. I'll now request Mr. Vijay Kalra to come on screen. Mr. Vijay Kalra.
Could I just say one more thing? You said my most recent book was the Quality Beyond Borders, but I've got one more recent than that.
Yeah.
And I call that book, the Hoshin book, the Quality Beyond Borders, and this one, I call them my quality trilogy, because each of them covers a different area of quality. So collectively they contain pretty well everything I know.
Sure. Mr. Hutchins, if you can just display that book once again, and I'll request the audience to please take a screenshot of it and make sure that the book you have this book on your bookshelf. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this. And one question that an audience, somebody is asking is, can we have the presentation, the slides? Friends, this session is already, it has been recorded, and if you get the recording will contain the slides as well. So, so thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Hutchins, for sharing very deep knowledge and giving us so many books. I'll now request Mr. Vijay Kalra, who is the governing council member of the Indian Society for Quality, and he's also the chair for Quality Earth Forum. He's the former director of Mahindra Institute of Quality. I'll request Mr. Kalra to please sum up the learnings from today and also give the concluding speech. Mr. Kalra.
Thank you, Amit, and good morning, Mr. Hudson, and good afternoon to all other friends. First is very good to see you, and the whole thing was very energizing. No? It gave possibility of the guys who have worked on shop floor in manufacturing industries to go back and relate many things. No? So that was the best part. I think the topic itself, no, when I read the topic PDCA, and the next line was, it is possibly deeper than you think. That itself gave a lot of message, and clearly many of people, and including us, who really don't realize depth of PDCA, and today's session, I think, helped in getting a better feel of the entire thing. It was good you started with history and gave idea when it is the PDCA started, and now I realize that if it was 1926, then we are in 2024. So 2 years down the line, ISQ may have a chance to celebrate 100 years of PDCA. I think
I
in
hadn't thought of
management
that.
studies, PDCA is, I mean, if I have to see contribution of PDCA, will be, I think, the largest. No, while as you rightly said that while we don't realize PDCA is the only way we work. No, so everything when we are going to a place, I mean, I have to just walk down to a friend's place now, and a lot of PDCA is going in subconscious. Okay, how to go, where to go, and all those things is happening, and obviously there will be a lot of checks coming. I mean, I will Google and see that how much time it will take. So all these things are happening, and based on that aligned action. So the example you took of cup of tea and making and all those things, and then how simply you changed into workflows and with various activities, and then you talked about how to take out things which are not adding value and how to make it more efficient and all those things. No, then you came to basically division of labor, then craftsman, the guy who was doing a job on its own and 100% was in control, and then foreman comes into picture, and then management comes for bigger resources and all those things, and then a specialist comes for knowledge piece of this thing, and how they mesh together and how they use their combined wisdom to come out with the answer is the way the work has to happen. Then you talk about flaws in PDCA. It looks very simple, but planning to action, what all can go wrong, what all can be missing. Then from action to check, and then check. How do we use that check to this thing? And then idea of getting inspector into the game and all those things. No, so I mean, and so this was a session basically how to apply PDCA, how to think more deeper about it, and how to use PDCA for a long-term benefit and continue doing it. I loved when you talked about how to get brain of all employees in organization benefit. Okay, the employee engagement thing. No, I think that's what uh, is not really taught. No, and it's more like one-way instruction that do like this and then it happens. And believe that my experience of working with Toyota is that a strength of organization to a large extent depends on the number of brains you are using in organization. Okay, the percentage of brains. I mean, I always say my the guys who work, I mean, closely with me, that take this as a KPI, that how many brains are involved in managing your show. Okay, it's only two or three at the top or that time. Then I think a very good idea that what management has to do and workers has to do, and how to make PDCA a way of life. So I I mean really love simplicity of presentation. I mean, I felt that I'm back in 1984 and 1990, sitting with a Toyota Motor Corporation instructor telling me very simply in a very basics, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, how to do. And then looking at, I was when your presentation was like booklets of we see for data production system philosophy and all those things. Very, very simple. And I feel this session was not PDCA only. It was basics of efficient manufacturing. Okay, we can get many more tools on top of it, of current tools and all those things. But I think this was very, very high on basics. And so thank you very much. I think the whole thing has been recorded. And my belief is that one has to go through 5 or 6 times to the entire thing to get real meaning of it. Okay. Knowing and understanding things is a huge different thing. And when you are going through session and some discussion, when you said that when you went to a QC circle and you found that nobody was there from West, or only one company was there, or one participant was there, I can simply correlate that common sense and basics. The whole now present education system and all those things want something complicated because that gives power. And this is delegation. This is empowering the entire team. Okay. So while this is the answer, but we are very lucky. We are part of Asia. So Asian old philosophy and all those things promote this. That's why we find easier to go with it, while we are still struggling in industry, in many of industries, to really take these teachings on. So thank you very much. It was very meaningful. And I don't feel I have heard better than this in last 30 years. Okay. Yeah. We have sessions where people talk technology, people talk empirical relations and digital and all those things, but talking about basics and common sense and how to really get the entire system to work for organization and get pride of it. The example you gave, that the person came, union person came and attended the session, was that the message he got is from his father, the feeling of pride of really making something good. That basic feeling of craftsman, that I created something and I'm happy about it. That peace can come only if we have this way of thinking. So appreciate. Thanks very much. And we'll love to hear you more and more. Thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you very much indeed. Could I just make one little when you were talking about the collective thinking power of the people, Bill Gates, the originator of Microsoft, he wrote something, I've never read the depth of it, but he came out with something which sums up what you're just saying there, part of it. He talked about corporate IQ. You could think of an organization where all of the brain power working towards making our company the best, and how much under-resourced, when you think of the resources of all of your people and you don't ask them anything, don't involve them in anything, there's all that brain power just sitting there not being used, and it's a terrible waste.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that 7 waste and now 8th waste, which people have started talking about, the talent and
very good. Thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate getting idea of what is our corporate IQ, but question is that how open we are there to use that IQ and be ready to wear those, and use it for value creation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalra. And Prabhakarji, are we going to open the camera for all the participants so that we can have a group picture?
Sure. It has been done. Yeah.
Okay. Could I just ask, can I make a request? I'd be very grateful for a copy of the recording.
Yes, sure. It will be sent to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And may I request everybody to please turn on your cameras and so that we can do the screenshot of a group photo. And Prabhakarji, I guess you need to also change the layout if you have locked it.
Yeah, is it? It's okay. I don't know. What is the layout change? 1 minute.
No, this is okay. This is okay. I think we are getting everybody together now.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
I think many.
So one message on the chat box is that people are still not able to turn on their camera. So if you can kindly look at that.
Has been done.
Okay.
Couldn't change video capability for the attendees. I don't know, some error is coming. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think there is an issue. It's not permitting.
Okay, no problem. So I think we can then, how do we take this session to conclusion, Mr. Prabhakar?
Yeah, okay, we can let us thank everybody who have joined today.
And being a Saturday, many of them, this is a non-working day, but a large number of people joined. That indicates, the sensitivity towards the subject of quality, and also, people listening very carefully, attentively, because the number of participants remained consistent throughout. But colleagues, my request to all the colleagues present here is that, the real benefit is not in just moving out of this session by just clapping. It is when we take an actionable along with us and a promise that yes, we will implement at least one thing, if not more, at least one thing out of this session, and that's the real reward that we can get, and that's a real token of respect that we can give to Mr. Hutchins. And having said that, I'll also request all of you to please subscribe to our LinkedIn channel, LinkedIn page, and stay updated on the events. Also, we are coming up with our annual conference in December. If you wish to attend that, now is the time to register. And yeah, so that's all. Anything else, Prabhakarji, that you would like to add, or Ramnathan sir, if you would like to add before we...
Well, I just want to thank David once again. You made a big impact, obviously, as you've seen. You've built a historical context. You've shown the forward and backward movement within the PDCA. You've shown the connection to the ground level through the QC circles. And you have shown the impact it has on an individual when a QC circle is started and he goes back home. And I think it's a very heartwarming presentation. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, and let us all meet once again on 30th November for the last session of the Quality Month lectures by Dr. N. Ravichandran at 10:30 a.m. Until then, thank you.
Prabhakarji, do we have anything next week, which is 23rd?
No, nothing next week.
Okay, all right.
We have a TOPS convention at Delhi, yes.
Okay, sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I shall leave now. Bye-bye.
Yes. Yeah. Bye, Mr. Hutchins. Thanks a lot.
And thank you for inviting me.
Our privilege to have you, and I will share the recording link with you. Yeah.
And I shall be back in India in about 3 weeks' time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm there only for 4 days. I'm 2 days at Lucknow and 2 days in Delhi.
Oh, okay. Not in Bengaluru, where we stay, where Mr. Ramnath and myself stay. So, okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.